We flew to Macau for the Asia Sports Collectors Convention 2024. Macau is basically the Las Vegas of Asia, a truly incredible place to visit and the perfect host for an event such as this. I spent my first day exploring the area before the show started, and I'm really glad I did. Some of these views were just incredible. Anyways, on the Thursday we headed over to Hong Kong to visit the Card Hobby store. Now, I'm a long time user of the Card Hobby platform, so it felt a little bit surreal to visit this place. I don't have a lot of experience visiting physical card stores, as in Europe and especially the UK, most are TCG only. Whereas this was a mixture of both TCG and sports, I felt there was a lot more sports than TCG. There was also a really cool mix of cards and other memorabilia, for example signed shirts, signed balls, all sorts really. And these were from some really exciting players and from different sports too, not just soccer. I'd never seen a signed Wemby shirt in person, for example, but we all know how huge that is. And of course, there were plenty of shirts from legends of the game, as well as players who are doing so well right now. Some of the cards in the cabinets were just printed off pictures, and I wondered why that was, but I was informed that it protects cards with autos from UV damage. I thought that was pretty interesting because it was something I'd never really considered, but it makes a lot more sense seeing the prices of them. These were not low end. But anyway, we had a bit more of an explore around Hong Kong. This was my first time here and I didn't know what to expect, but it was a really cool place. It was then time to head into the show for day one. Now this was a sports collectors convention, so naturally there was a lot of stuff here, not just cards. Much like in the Card Hobby store, there was a lot of signed memorabilia, especially shirts and football boots. I remember the first Asia Sports Collectors Convention, which was last year. I wasn't in attendance myself, but I vividly remember sitting there in the UK watching hundreds of Instagram stories from show attendees. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It felt like every table had 30 one-of-ones, crazy Logo Man cards, just insane stuff. And it was very much like that for show 2. I've never seen so much Eminence, so much Dynasty, so much high-end stuff in person. It's the kind of thing that UK card show attendees dream of. There is absolutely no searching for high end here, although you'll be hard pressed to find many cheap flick boxes for £5 bangers. This is why I love doing shows in other countries. You see tons of cards that you didn't even know had been pulled. I've never seen most of these cards before. And during the show, I posted a lot to our Instagram story. Give that a follow at TFF Breaks, and everybody seemed to agree that this stuff was just crazy. It felt like a truly formative hobby experience. I'll never be the same collector again after this. My PC felt so inferior. The big dogs in the hobby were in attendance also, as you'd probably expect. Now these are the big companies that the hobby relies on so much, and some of them had these really huge elaborate stalls going on. For example, PSA's was especially cool, I thought, with so much information displayed. I'd also never been to a show where Panini had been in attendance, I don't think. I imagine they do a lot of shows, I've just never been at any of them. This show, although it had a lot of huge soccer cards, also had a lot of other sports very well represented. It was very basketball heavy. Now this seemed to be the dominant sport here. And maybe my videos are a little bit biased as I did film a whole lot of soccer, but I really have no idea what I'm looking at a lot of the time with basketball. I do like the sport a lot and I watch it a fair bit, but in hobby terms I'm absolutely clueless. There were a good few consignment options at the show, whether the likes of alt or consigners who work primarily on Card Hobby. It's interesting seeing which types of cards are valued in different markets, and consignment companies obviously give you that option to sell your card in a market which is maybe a little bit better suited to you. Anyone who has used Card Hobby enough will most likely tell you the same. The market in Asia is overwhelmingly in favour of high end. A lot of the stalls were giving out freebies, or had games, or had spaces to sit and relax, or places to open sealed boxes also. Many of them felt like small rooms or zones in their own right, rather than just stalls at a card show. Walking around this place felt like how I imagine it feels walking around the big US shows. Obviously, if I'm wrong there, you can correct me, please do, but this is how I always imagine them to be at least. I got involved with as many of the vendors' activities as I could. I especially liked PSA's games and won myself some nice PSA merch. I'm very much a PSA fanboy anyway, so I was very happy with that. The tables were broadly split up into zones, one for TCG on the left and one for sports on the right, but of course a lot of individual vendors had both. The TCG selection was really interesting actually. There was a lot of Asia exclusive products and cards which, although you do see them in Europe, they were much more plentiful here. And as usual, Topps had a really nice display going on, as did Card Hobby, as did eBay, as did everyone really. You could tell a lot of effort had been made to make the show visually appealing, and at times it felt a little bit like a hobby museum. There was a lot of other stuff going on also, for example TCG tournaments, a stage with talks happening, a football pitch, loads of stuff. There was honestly a stacked schedule of different things happening all weekend, and they even had some football legends in attendance. There was a meet and greet type of zone where you could purchase a ticket to meet the footballer of your choice. Javier Zanetti, Rivaldo and Andrea Pirlo were there for the show. Personally, I purchased a ticket to meet Andrea Pirlo. That was a non-negotiable for me. I couldn't pass up that opportunity. I got a card signed and then it was graded on site by CGC. What an opportunity that was. And the new CGC Signature Series labels look incredible, by the way. One thing I found really interesting at the show was that the majority of cards were graded, most by PSA. Obviously, if you go to card shows anywhere, you will see a lot of slabs, especially for the higher end stuff, but here it felt like a good 90% of cards were graded, with the exception of obviously the really thick cards, which are very rarely slabbed anyway. And maybe it was just because the show was overwhelmingly high end, or maybe it is a difference in collecting culture. I'm not too sure on that one. There was also a really noticeable upcharge on superfractors. Now, I talk about superfractor tax a lot in everyday hobby conversations, but it's only really noticeable for players whose cards go for a fair bit anyway. But here, even for the most random player or a player who people don't really collect, a superfractor still commanded a huge amount of money. It seemed as though if it wasn't a one of one, it was pretty much worthless or at least not very valued. And a one of one, especially a superfractor, regardless of the player, was a card that people wanted. And as someone who does buy a lot of cards from Asia, I do see that kind of thing a lot. You can often pick up to 5s, to 10s, to 25s in Asia a hell of a lot cheaper than you can pick them up for in the European market. But then, one of ones often go for way above what they go for here, so it swings and roundabouts. Another interesting thing I noticed was that everywhere I looked, someone was ripping a box. And there wasn't actually too many vendors doing sealed product, so I'm not entirely sure where this stuff was coming from for the most part. Again, you see people opening boxes at every card show, obviously, but I'm talking box after box being ripped here. And again, that is another interesting difference in hobby culture between Europe and Asia. In Europe, we're very much involved in box breaks. Now, we at TFF, we are box breakers, so maybe you could claim bias. but you'd be hard pressed to find that many somewhat active sports collectors in Europe who don't touch breaks at all. That's how we get our cards. In Asia, of course, people buy into breaks as well, but there is a big culture of ripping cases and cases of product as personals. People were flying through these boxes like there was no tomorrow. Personally, I can't open boxes for myself. Luck is very honestly never in my favour, but we do pull some lovely cards in our daily breaks. Check out our Instagram at TFF Breaks if you want to see some of the beauties we've pulled recently. But anyway, the excited shrieks of show attendees throughout the day mean that at least some people were getting some luck with their personal rips, which is good. It was then time to say goodbye. I managed to pick up a few cards over the show weekend, 3 Paulo Dybalas, he's one of the players I collect, 2 of them being one-of-ones, and a player who's doing really well at the moment, a rookie Matteo Retegui, before I headed home.